The top 5 games for the Game Boy Advance. The Game Boy Advance is definitely one of my favorite consoles, handheld or home, of all time, due to its extensive library of classic games, many of which hold up to this day as some of the best gaming experiences of all time that are remembered fondly by many. Here is my list of the top 5 games of all time for the Game Boy Advance. One thing to note here. I will not be putting more than one game from the same game franchise in this list. This list would definitely have looked different had I done so. Of course, all of the opinions here are my own, and I am only speaking from my own experience. Number 5. Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. First up on the list, at number 5, we have Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald versions, the third generation of Pokemon games. While Fire Red and Leaf Green are well-done remakes of the original Red and Blue versions, I felt it wouldn't be right to include remakes rather than original games in this list. Now, some people might be wondering why I'm putting these games at number 5 and not higher on the list, despite the fact that the Pokemon games on the Game Boy Advance were some of my most played games on the system and were all really enjoyable Pokemon entries. Now, to give some context to this, Pokemon absolutely burst onto the gaming scene in the late 90s with Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow for the Game Boy, and then Generation 2's games, Pokemon Silver, Gold, and Crystal for the Game Boy and Game Boy Color. Simply improved on absolutely every single aspect of the originals, even going so far as to include the original Kanto region. The third generation had a big act to follow up on, due to Generation 2's games being so massive and beloved. And for the most part, it does. The third-gen games add many new Pokemon that have become series staples. The Hoenn region is a nice new continent for Pokemon fans to journey through. The plot is pretty good for a Pokemon game, especially when compared to some of the more recent entries, and it feels satisfying to train up and progress through the game. These are the reasons why these games are on the list at all. However, I do feel like Generation 3 was a bit of a letdown compared to the home run that Game Freak had hit with the Generation 2 games. I feel that the added Pokemon are not quite as memorable as those added in Gen 2. The plot doesn't really contain any mysterious aspects to it, and the experience is a bit more on rails than I would like. Some of my favorite parts of the Gen 1 games, for example, are the exploration aspects, the abandoned power plant, the mansion on Cinnabar Island, the unknown dungeon in Cerulean City, and especially the Seafoam Islands. These areas are some of the coolest places to explore due to their mysterious nature and the fact that you feel a sense of isolation when progressing through them. There are some enemy trainers, a ton of wild Pokemon, no Pokemon centers for miles, and a legendary Pokemon at the end of your trials that you must catch as a reward for making your way through. I feel that this element is a little bit missing in Generation 3. Okay, I think I've gone on long enough to make a separate video about my nostalgia for the first 2 generations of Pokemon games. In short, the Generation 3 games are great, but I feel they are a bit too derivative and don't add enough to be as memorable as the previous ones, which is why I have to put them at number 5. Number 4. Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones. Fire Emblem first came to the West with a couple of Game Boy Advance games, and I have to say, with games like Advance Wars, Final Fantasy Tactics, and then Fire Emblem, the Game Boy Advance was one of the best consoles in terms of turn-based strategy titles. Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones takes the number 4 spot on this list, since it is truly what classic Fire Emblem is all about. An epic plot where your ragtag battalion tries its best to defeat an overwhelming and evil enemy army that has overrun the land. The combat, with its rock-paper-scissors style, is at its peak in the Sacred Stones. The characters are interesting, the dynamic within the group is well written, the graphics are top-notch for a GBA game, and the battles can get pretty tough, especially if you're trying to complete the game without losing any of your party members. This Fire Emblem has it all, and that's why it is still one of my favorite games from the Game Boy Advance era. Number 3. Mega Man Battle Network 2. At number 3, I choose Mega Man Battle Network 2, the best game in the Mega Man Battle Network series of games for the Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS. Now, I have never been that big on the Mega Man series. I played and enjoyed Mega Man X, but honestly the run-and-gun gameplay with trial and error never really gripped me as much as it does others. One day I remembered reading about Mega Man Battle Network in an issue of Nintendo Power, and I became intrigued by the plot and battle system. The plot of the Mega Man Battle Network series is genius, and really foresaw a lot of technical developments in the real world. In the game, everyone has their own handheld personal tablet-type device, which can be utilized for communication, but for the most part seems to be used for web browsing and playing games. And all of these devices have a so-called NetNavi inside of them. That is a sort of artificial intelligence that is manifested in a humanoid form. In this game, Mega Man is the NetNavi of the main protagonist, Lan. These NetNavis act as assistants for their human companions, and they can battle viruses and other NetNavis as well. Almost every object in the game is smart. That is, you can quote-unquote jack in and have Mega Man enter the world of the smart object in order to solve problems, fight viruses, or take on evil NetNavis that are up to no good. I don't want to spoil too much of the plot here, but it was a series of games that was truly ahead of its time. Battles work in a standard JRPG manner, with random encounters with viruses as Mega Man traverses the World Wide Web. Battles take place on a grid of 18 squares, and you have to quickly utilize Mega Man's Mega Buster weapon or other battle chips to delete enemies. Lan can input battle chips during battle in order to give Mega Man special attacks or abilities, and learning how to properly utilize these chips to counter specific enemies is the name of the game here. The graphics and soundtrack are also top-notch. Excellent work by Capcom here. There are a lot of original tracks that are extremely memorable, and a lot of excellent remixes of classic Mega Man music. There were several Mega Man Battle Network games released on the Game Boy Advance, but the general consensus is that Mega Man Battle Network 2 was the greatest of these. And I tend to agree. The plot is the tightest, with the least amount of filler, and the areas that Lan and Mega Man have to traverse are definitely more interesting than the slightly bland, underdeveloped areas in the original Mega Man Battle Network. The other Battle Network games are also great, and I did end up playing all of them, 1 through 6, but Battle Network 2 takes the cake here, and the number 3 spot on this list. Number 2, Advance Wars 2, Black Hole Rising. Advance Wars definitely has to be one of my most favorite series of all time, and I am so glad that Nintendo is working on a remaster of Advance Wars 1 and 2, though I really wish they could have included the DS game Dual Strike in this collection as well, as it builds off the story of the first two. In Advance Wars, you take command of various armies under different commanders in order to fight back against the overwhelming Black Hole Army and their motley crew of unique generals. You have to learn how to correctly utilize your unit roster, made up of land, sea, and air units, in order to dominate the variety of different maps throughout the campaign. Artillery, support units, light tanks, heavy tanks, anti-tank infantry, combat helicopters, fighter jets, bombers, armored transport vehicles. There is a full assortment of units here, and you have to master the utilization of all of them if you want to have a chance at victory. Advance Wars was essentially the first turn-based strategy wargame I have ever played, and I suppose you could argue that this game and Fire Emblem are where my interest in such strategy games began. One of the most important aspects of Advance Wars is the strategies you have to utilize when controlling different commanders, and when facing different commanders. Every commander in the game, friend or foe, has unique traits. For example, Eagle has a strong air force, but is weak on land. Andy, the main face of the franchise, is a well-rounded commander. Each commander also has a unique ability that must be taken into account during battle. Most importantly, each commander has a unique track, and the soundtrack of the Advance Wars games is simply phenomenal. The track for each commander is a classic and deserves praise. I spent a ton of time with all of the Advance Wars games, including Dual Strike and Days of Ruin on the DS. All of these games are phenomenal, but the series really came into its own with Advance Wars 2, Black Hole Rising on GBA, which is why I have to choose this game for the number 2 slot. Honorable mentions. Of course, there are so many games deserving of being on such a list, but unfortunately I had to narrow down the list somehow. So here are some of the games that didn't quite make the cut for me, but are still classics. The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap, Mario & Luigi: Superstar Saga, Rebel Star: Tactical Command, Mario Kart Super Circuit, and Dragon Ball Z: The Legacy of Goku 1 and 2. Number 1. Metroid Fusion. The number 1 game for me on Game Boy Advance is Metroid Fusion. This game is an absolute classic due to its tight gameplay, story, and atmosphere. Every aspect of this game was nailed 100%. Now, some people argue that this isn't the most proper Metroid game out there, and it is different in some respects, but I feel it is one of the perfect Metroid experiences for me, personally, with Metroid Prime being the other one. Metroid is about that feeling of exploration, of isolation, of discovery and fear all at the same time. And Metroid Fusion delivers on all of those fronts. The game mainly takes place on an overrun space station, and I have to say, the atmosphere of this creepy station, where everything left alive wants to kill you, is fear-inducing. In a lot of ways, this game reminds me a lot of Alien Isolation, and you can tell that Metroid is definitely another series inspired by the Alien movies. The feeling of isolation and terror as you make your way through the station while avoiding a seemingly invincible enemy. That's the name of the game in both of these experiences. Other than the setting and atmosphere, Metroid Fusion is like most other 2D Metroid games. You progress, you explore, you gain power-ups and abilities, you locate energy tanks. Everything is here. The thing about Metroid Fusion that some people criticize is that it is a bit more guided than other entries. The missions are a bit more straightforward and explained in more specific detail. Get to this location and do this thing. It's definitely more on rails than something like the original Metroid. However, I don't think Metroid Fusion does this to the point where it's detrimental to the experience. And honestly, it makes total sense when taking the context of the plot into account. I picked this game over Metroid Zero Mission, which is also an excellent game, since it is an original experience and since there is just something about the aesthetic and gameplay of this outing in particular that draws me in especially. There are 2 games where I have filled up all 4 available save slots and then painfully erased one of them so that I could experience the game just one more time. This happened with Paper Mario 64 and with Metroid Fusion. That is why I have to put Metroid Fusion at number 1 on this list of the list of best Game Boy Advance games of all time. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was quite fun to make, and it was definitely a nostalgic experience going back and thinking about all these classics and what makes them so good, even after all this time. If you enjoy videos about games in general, retro games, nostalgia-filled experiences, modern gaming, and more, consider liking this video and perhaps subscribing to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.